this one feels like it's on the bigger end of the spectrum. This is the 1 seed and the 2 seed. This is, the number 1 defense and the number 3 offense. It is a Philadelphia franchise that has a massive following. It's an 49ers franchise that has a massive following. It's in Philly. These teams have not played in the postseason in, over 25 years. They've only played once.
They don't even play that much to begin with.
They really don't. They're two humongous storyline teams. Like the Eagles have been a huge story all year. The Niners have been a huge story for several years now. They're just massive. I do think this feels extra big. This matchup, the Eagles feel like a juggernaut. The Niners have been in these games so many times under Kyle Shanahan that this game just feels humongous.
In a weird way, and I'm not trying to be prisoner of the moment, it feels going into the game the biggest game of Kyle Shanahan's his era.
What do you mean by that?
Non-Super Bowl.
You're going to have to convince me on that.
I feel that first year when they had a ton of success and they were the 1 seed, it's just like everything's so new. You're playing the Packers who weren't that good. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of buzz and excitement, and that year was awesome. But I think most people view that Packer team as kind of frauds.
The Viking team.
The Niners were huge favorites in both those 2 games.
Yeah.
Last year, it was the complete opposite. They were just underdogs. It was just people were just praying for a victory, right? No one, the overwhelming majority of 49er fans did not think they were going to beat Green Bay. So going into the game, it's fun because it's a huge playoff game. You weren't viewing it like, we're just a huge underdog. We're not. These are like equal teams with elite players everywhere. I honestly think this has a feel of like some of the Harbaugh. To me, the championship game where he beats Atlanta did not have the same vibe as the Giants won and as Seattle won. Those felt like, holy fuck, especially the Seattle one. I would say this is the biggest, if I had to rank them going into the game, that Seattle one and this Eagle one are just like, people can't wait. Because you don't know what you're going to see. You expect we could win, we could lose, elite players on the road, crazy environment. The 12's probably a little friendlier, but loud. This little angrier, but also loud. I was watching Kelsey today. They have to go silent snap count at home. And he's not even mad. He's like, yeah, fans just get kind of rowdy. But
I love that. The Eagles fans are basically like, hey, you guys figure it out.
Yeah, we're paying a premium.
I paid a lot of money to be here.
We're going to enjoy the shit out of this. And it's just, this is what playoff football is. And they asked Kelsey also about how happy he was about his brother's game not ending up in the dome. And he's like, playoff football is meant to be in the cold. And the one thing the 49ers have done for being a warm weather team, they're a cold, they translate to the cold. Right, they've translated to Seattle ugly games. They're translated to Green Bay game last year. They are built for this environment, which also makes it cool, right? It wasn't like, well, the Niners are this 13-14, but they're built like a dome team, like the fucking Bills. Ironically, they play in the cold. The Niners are built for this. There's just, like you said, 2 just massive brands, 2 massive stories. I'd say for a couple years running. I mean, last year the Eagles sent Carson Wentz packing and went with Jalen Hurts. The Niners were definitely one of the biggest stories in the league last year where they traded 3 first-round picks to draft a quarterback. And now 2 years later, he's not even playing because of Brock Purdy. You have Jalen Hurts.
And Brock's become one of the biggest stories in the NFL.
And Brock's become one of the biggest stories. And both these 2 teams made massive trades, one during the draft and one during the season for McCaffrey and AJ, who I would say over the last half decade, non-quarterbacks. I mean, these guys are 2 of the more famous skill guys in the league, right? Christian McCaffrey and A.J. Brown.
Yep.
There's not a person alive that plays fantasy football that doesn't know who those 2 guys are. So they both have star defensive players. They both have legendary offensive linemen. They both have offensively led, I would say, organizations. Look at the Eagles, right? Andy, Doug, Sirianni, Chip, the 49ers, Bill Walsh, Harbaugh, Kyle, Mariucci, they tend to lean offense. But I would say both teams, they're good teams. Andy's great teams and Doug's team and this team, they do have star defensive players. The Niners have always been led by great defenses, ironically, because they're kind of known as offensive U, but they're actually from Ronnie Lott led defenses in the 80s to that 94 team when they signed Dion to Harbaugh. Harbaugh's teams were defensive led. And I mean, Kyle, literally his team is the number one defense in the league. He does not rolling in the number one offense, even though the offense is potent. They're the number one defense in the league. They've always had elite defensive coordinators. Like Fangio became a legend under Harbaugh. Saul has gotten a job. D'Amico's about to get a job. The Eagles, also a lot like the Niners, pump out a lot of assistants. I mean, honestly, their two guys could become head coaches. Did you say was the buzz that Steichen was going to go to had a chance at Carolina?
That's what one of the Philly reporters said.
Gotcha. So
who knows? But I saw Benjamin Albright today say that he thinks Jonathan Gannon, who is the Eagles' defensive coordinator, will end up in Houston.
And there's a lot of buzz about D'Amico going to Denver.
Yeah.
Right. So they might get a little lucky, right? Shane just doesn't have a job and just comes back.
They'd get very lucky if Steichen ended up coming back. Yeah.
Because it does feel like Indy's going to hire Friday, Saturday. So, and the Arizona, who knows? But yeah. So
yeah, Arizona actually, Steichen might be a good fit there. But yeah, I mean, it is. On a basic level, it's just two of the most famous franchises, right? Like Niners Rams last year did 50 million. This game, I think, should be a higher rated game. But Niners Rams is a pretty easy.
I think when they're all good, you could argue the Niners are top. I mean, they're right there as like a top 3 brand. Cowboys are 1. I think there's probably an argument for the Packers when they're humming. They're fucking massive. Then I think there's probably 3 or 4 teams that would be fighting for that number 3 spot. And I think the Niners, the Giants, the Steelers. I mean, they'd be on the short list, but the Niners, and listen, I'm not trying to diminish the Eagles because the Eagles are, when they matter for the league. But the Niners are bigger, but the Eagles are damn big too. So
it is, what the Niners do is they play kind of the type of game that Philadelphia identifies with as a town, right? Like when this broadcast starts, you're going to see a shot of Rocky Balboa's statue and the stairs that Rocky runs up in the movie. And the Niners have guys that play Rocky Balboa type games. Like if this is a boxing match, you'd say if it turns into a boxing match, small area, hand-to-hand combat, it's good for the Niners because that's what they know. That is what Debo knows. That is what Christian McCaffrey knows. And if you want to pick apart the Eagles a little bit, one thing you'd say is because they've been so dominant, which there's no such thing as, it's no bad, it's only good when you're dominant. But they just haven't been in as many of these types of games as the Niners have. And I know the Niners blow people out, but the Niners play kind of the same game against bad teams and good teams, right?
Yeah.
And I just think Debo, like you go back and watch I went back and watched Niners Eagles from last year, which was week 2, I think.
When Lions Eagles
translates a lot of the Eagles defense has gotten better. They've upgraded their receivers. Jalen Hurts has gotten better. A lot's changed since that game. But I just wanted to see how did Hurts look moving against the Niners front because it's still Armstead and Bosa and again the Niners front has changed also. And the one thing that really stood out in that game was guess who made some big freaking plays in that game was Debo. And I think it benefits the Niners, and we talked about this on the last show. Like the Eagles are the number 1 first half scoring offense in the NFL. If they get out to a fast start, that is a problem for the 49ers. But if they don't, the Niners style, which is Philadelphia would love this 49ers team because it's a very blue collar style of football. And I'm not saying I think Jalen Hurts can probably play that style, right? I think Jalen Hurts can play a game where he's 12-17, but he's running all over the place. We'll see. But I think the Niners are built for what Philadelphia is as a town. And I think that's Debo. McCaffrey to me is classic. Like his numbers, sometimes you look up, he's like 2.9 yards a carry, but you just feel him. And the Niners are built for that kind of game.
I was just thinking, listen, when I used to get my oil changed in Philly, where a lot of people went in our front office, it was like downtown Philadelphia, and you'd pull into this garage, and upstairs in this guy's office, and this guy was like 50 years old. He was like a light heavyweight, boxer growing up.
Golden Gloves?
Yeah, that's exactly what he was. And he was, on the fringe of becoming like a legit pro boxer, but you would go up to take a leak, and in his office, and just these pictures, again, downtown, like where it's already kind of tough. And it was like, it feels like I'm fucking Rocky Jr. down here fixing my car. And it's the complete opposite for anyone that's lived, in San Francisco and the Silicon Valley. It's a different way of life. And, I was watching Rocky probably within the last couple weeks, Rocky 3 with Carl Weathers, who I did because I was like, God damn, Carl Weathers is just jacked. And he's Apollo Creed. And I Google it, played linebacker at Long Beach State, got undrafted free agent in 1970 or 71 for the Raiders with John Madden. I think got cut pretty quick and transitioned pretty fast into acting. But it's just the way the societal kind of construct of the two areas couldn't be much different. I've lived in both.
I would say now, though, right? Like, I think once upon a time, I bet the Bay Area viewed itself.
Yeah, I'd say pre-Silicon Valley blowing up the last 15, 20 years, Northern California was a lot different. But most people just had blue-collar jobs throughout, like, up to 95. It wasn't like, just going into my my white-collar job at Dell. It didn't even exist.
Yeah, here's Master.
I'm with you.
Stream, watching the Ham Pod right now from Cyprus.
Exactly.
Country or the golf course? Maybe it is.
Might be the area.
Golf course.
If it is the course, I mean that sums it up, guy. Now it's not like Philly, like Tiger hosted a golf tournament when I was there at Aronimink. It's not like they don't have nice shit, but one thing these two places have, they fucking love their NFL teams, and the 49ers were so goddamn big, the other team had to get the hell out of there because they had no shot at any money. They just stifled all the cat. They had the market cornered on every human and every dollar. The Eagles have just had the market corner because they're the only NFL team. But both of them, you can say the Bay Area can be a baseball town. You can say Philly can be just whatever town that the team. I think the football teams have come. The Niners have come first since 1981. And, you'd have to ask like Reuben Frank or Sal Palantonio. But I would imagine the Eagles have been first since probably the early 80s as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't care how big, when the Giants are rolling and the Warriors, when the Niners are big, their numbers dwarf the other. It's just football's different to consume. It's easier. It's only one game. We've always talked about that. And I'm not just saying this because, I'm a football guy. I love sports. They're just the biggest. And that's the way it is in most of these towns, right? Obviously, the Dodgers are bigger than the Rams, right? But if the Rams had been there for 50 years, it'd probably be a little different. And maybe the Dodgers and Yankees are just kind of unique, which I'd probably say they are.
Yeah, I mean, one thing all of those, a significant one thing that comes into play with all of those teams you're mentioning are history in terms of just the amount of time in a location and success. Like a lot of winning, right? The 49ers have been in more NFC conference championship games than any other franchise. Like the Dodgers came out and were just really good for a long time. The Yankees have been maybe the best franchise in all of professional sports. Even the Giants came out in 58 and the San Francisco Giants, right? And were really good.
Being good.
I heard
that's the only way to get big is to be good. Right?
I heard Mad Dog the other day. Yesterday, this guy was on his show as a guest. He's like, Chris, I remember when you used to say, I give all of my Marconis for a World Series. And then they won 3. The guy's like, what are you even mad about anymore? I'd give all of my Marconis for just one. Talking about this.
Well, it's why a lot of comedians, it's hard to be funny when you get rich, right?
Yeah. Whose theory is?
Yeah, it's hard to be funny when you're sleeping in satin sheets. Wasn't that Eddie Murphy or one of those
Well,
guys?
no, I was thinking of the guy I saw the other day that said, what's his name? What's the comedian? Very hot comedian. Very good. Hilarious. Middle-aged, redhead. Bill Burr, who said maybe it was David Spade. One of those guys was like, yeah, all these guys are from the Northeast. I don't remember.
Oh, yeah, because they're angry. Yeah.
Bill Burr. Anyway.
But the thing the Niners have, even more, obviously the Eagles just won their first Super Bowl in 17. And it shows you how much people cared about football back then. They had successful teams, but hell, they had only been to a couple Super Bowls over like a 30-year span. I mean, the 49ers, just every generation, whether you're our age, whether you were, in your mid-70s, whether you're 60, whether you're a 15-year-old kid now, you've experienced just a lot of really sweet teams. And that is something that just, there is no circumventing the importance of that to build and just create like these games are the sweetest. So you want to play in these games. Like think about the Bears, for example. Like the Cubs won a World Series more recently. The Bulls have had some, playoff level teams. The Bears, it doesn't feel like ever go to the playoffs. Fuck, you gave them 1 year. If they were just like a 14-win team, the whole fucking city was shut down. If they were just in this game. The importance. The Niners now, this is their third time in 4 years. Third time in 4 years. Like it feels pretty normal, even though it has not been. I mean, this season they went 13-4. This doesn't feel like your typical 13-4 season. Like the Eagles, what's crazy is we've talked about it, and I'm guilty of this. Like the Eagles are some juggernaut. They have one more win than the Niners. One more win.
Yeah.
But their season has felt much more normal beside like a 2-week stretch when Minshew came in than the 49ers. Now, part of that is losing quarterbacks.
Well, the Eagles established early they were one of the best. It just kind of early on, right?
When the Niners were 3-4, they were 7-0.
So that's they feel like the Niners felt in 19.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they feel like the Niners felt in 19. I just think part of it. What do you think about the style of game? The fact that they haven't. I would say we'd have to go through it feels like the Niners might in 19 maybe got tested a little more than this Philly team did. But again, I just refuse to knock a team for blowing people out, right? Oh, their schedule wasn't that good. Well, they kicked everyone's ass. So that's what you do when your schedule's not that good, right? That said, what about if this game is 14-14 going into the third quarter? Like, do the Niners have some advantage there? I don't know. I mean, the Eagles are good teams. I don't know that there's a ton of advantage there. But like when we say, well, Jalen Hurts has played in a lot of big games, or Brock Purdy hasn't played in an environment like this. Those things are true. But to me, what really matters is Brock Purdy is playing that defensive line. Jalen Hurts is playing that defensive line. Like to me, the biggest thing about big games is less about the pressure that you feel because of how much is on the line and more about how good the other players on the other team are. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the pressure of the game, all that shit's real. But eventually every player that ever plays in this game says, yeah, you don't feel that for 4 quarters. You get over it. And then you're playing the great players on the other side. Like, and that is what matters in this game. And I don't know. I think the Niners are just built for like the type of game that they play historically under Kyle is a playoff style of game.
Well, the one thing the Niners have going for them is their core group of star players have all been through this the last couple of years. Like the Eagles, they're this version of their team. Like the Niners team is basically the same back to back. I mean, they've added their quarterback's different, but like the core group of guys, which is the reason that they win or they lose, have now basically played in all these games over the last 4 seasons. They've added, Trent's come, McCaffrey's come, but like those are plug and play players that could play in any environment, right? That the Eagles, like their core group of guys that were part of that Super Bowl team, are much older, and they're relying on, A.J. Brown, who's been with a very successful team, but not with this quarterback. Jalen's played in 2 playoff games. Devontae, this is his second season in the league. Miles Sanders and Goddard, this is their first 2 years in 6. They've been a part of 1 playoff victory. Obviously, the coaching staffs, I think. One thing, the parallels of these 2 coaching staffs, like they're led at the top. The Eagles are 3 guys. They're talked about, right? Sirianni and his 2 coordinators, and really it's just Kyle and D'Amico, all young guys, right? I mean, Kyle's 43, the oldest, I think, of the 4. D'Amico, I would guess, is 38, 39. If you look at the resumes of the 2 coordinators for Sirianni, they were both quality control guys within the last 6-7 years. It's not like they have been long-time position coaches in the league. Like, for example, the 2 coordinators for the offensive head coaches in the AFC game for Zach and Andy are Steve Spagnuolo and Lou Anarumo. I always screw up his name. Coach Lou. Those guys, Spags has been in the league since you and I were fucking really young, probably in high school, and been a defensive coordinator in the NFL for a long time. And Coach Lou, like, he's 58 years old. He's been a position coach in the NFL for a while. So it's just, this is a very young, it kind of speaks to, Jeffrey is a lot older than Jed, but they're very similar in like they love getting credit for getting the young hotshot. Like they kind of live for it.
Yeah, I think what's different is that, Jed handed the whole thing over to Kyle. Whereas Howie Roseman just won the Executive of the Year award for the second time. I think maybe there's only one other GM that's done that. It hasn't happened many times.
Did Howie win it?
I thought I saw he just won it today. And Brian Daboll, the Coach of the Year. Maybe not the NFL, like maybe it's like the AP award, not the official. I shouldn't say not the official, but
you're right. It was because there's the Pro Football Writers of America, and then there's the AP.
Which one was this? The Pro Football Writers?
Roseman, Vice President, General Manager, was named the 2022 Executive of the Year by the Pro Football Writers of America. He won the award also in 2017.
So they are, like, I do think they're different in that.
But like that final five, the one Kyle's on and Sirianni's not, is that the AP? Are they separate? Did you see that?
I thought that was the same thing that Dave. That's the one. Daboll just won it.
Daboll won it.
Final three. There was a final three I saw of Kyle, Daboll, and Doug Peterson.
And Daboll was named the Coach of the Year by the
Daboll, yeah, because in Coach of the Year voting, they prefer you to coach a team that we thought was going to suck, and you win 9 games instead of just being great, like Andy, let's say, won 14 games. Great year, 14 games, incredible. But the Giants were supposed to suck, and Daniel Jones was supposed to suck, and Brian Daboll.
Andy's never winning the Coach of the Year.
We love to be like, if you ain't first, you're last. Except when it comes to Coach of the Year awards, where it's like, middle of the pack when we thought you were going to suck. Congrats. How can you be the Coach of the Year with 9 wins? That's insane to me.
Well, how do Belichick and Phil Jackson have a combined 2?
Exactly. Greg Popovich. Jimmy Johnson won the award with 7 wins one year.
Jimmy Johnson, the Fox guy?
Cowboys coach. Early 90s, one with 7 wins. Went 7
because they had sucked so much. So by the second year when they were competitive. You're right. We look at it. I do think we got to give Daboll some credit. He was pretty good this year.
I am not saying Daboll's not worthy. I'm just saying we overvalue. We thought you were going to suck and you didn't suck instead of you had a target on your back and you backed it up. Like, how about that? Well, the more I've thought about it, I was not all year long like a Shanahan advocate for Coach of the Year. But the more I've thought about it, it's like if we're comparing it to Daboll, who won 9 and did a great job, absolutely deserving. Kyle just a 2 seed with a third string quarterback. That's insane.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I think the way I watched Jason Kelsey's press conference, and he was asked because last week he said if we win in the trenches, we're going to win this game. And they asked him that, you believe that that's going to carry over to this game? He said, no, I don't. He said, last game, I knew that if we dominated as an offensive line, their defensive line is kind of all they had, they weren't going to beat us. He's like, everyone has to come to the table in this game. Basically speaking, this is a completely different world of an opponent. So this is not I got to do my job. Jalen's got to do his job. Fletcher Cox got to do his, we got to dominate in every phase, and that to me summed up we're getting a real game. This is kind of the round robin. I think we all thought we were getting with the Bills, Bengals, and Chiefs, that they were inevitably all kind of, one was going to get KO'd, but the other two would, one team would have to go through both. And turns out Cincinnati, but it's just each game is going to be just woof. And turns out the Bills actually weren't ready. It does feel we're getting the best game on paper that's humanly possible in the NFL with these two teams roster wise. Now,
that's the part we haven't mentioned, that all the star players.
There's a ton. And that's to me what, yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. You said you just started to say the star players.
Well, no, I mean, it's just, it's a Pro Bowl level group of players at every position.
A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Debo, McCaffrey, Goddard, Kittle, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Trent Williams. Who did I skip? Oh, Ayuk. Fred Warner, Bradbury, no fly zone Slay or whatever his name is.
Ward. Both Wards. I mean, I think Jimmy Ward, is just a winning high level championship level player. He was so good last week when you watch that game back, just hitting people, sure tackling. You don't start for either one of these two teams beside Eagles linebackers if you're not just a really, really high-end player. Because that's the only position where you go, every guy in our unit would start for you, where like both teams would say this guy could start here, this guy would start here. You would take Trent over Mulata, but it's Mulata's really good relative to the rest of the league. Kelsey would start over everybody. Lane Johnson would obviously be the right tackle. You would take Hurts. We can get into that a little later. I think the league would, just based on one guy who just was a second round pick and potentially won an MVP. But who knows? Maybe next year Brock Purdy's competing to win the MVP. You go, well, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, is that a better combo than Debo and Ayuk? Maybe it is better production wise, but it's not like every team in the league wouldn't take Debo and Ayuk. Goddard's an up and coming star. Yeah, George Kittle's better, but it's like they're fucking both Pro Bowl level guys. The Niners running backs are probably a little. I mean,
they're better. I do think they're better.
Miles Sanders is a really good player. You would go, Bosa's the best defensive lineman, but then you might go the next couple are coming from them, because I think the two guys, Reddick, I saw Kyle was asked about it because they used to play him when he was with the Cardinals for a long time.
Yeah.
And he just he had a good point. He said the thing with pass rushers, if you can stay healthy, it's one of the rare positions in the NFL, probably a lot like quarterbacks, but it's obviously much more determined on your athleticism, explosiveness. You actually get better with age, and it makes sense. You just become so much smarter, because it is, for being this kind of crazy, physical position, it's kind of got this like nuanced, almost like Taekwondo element to it, because the hand fighting, it's not just like, it's a lot of, and that's where I think Nick really thrives. He's like a football genius, I think, as a player. And it's using a lot of intellect.